Basketball Manitoba podcast, we have Rick DeGagne. Rick is one of the most experienced officials in Manitoba and has been part of the basketball community since 1977. He is a staple in the Brandon community, having coached and officiated there for over 40 years. He played 3 years with the Brandon Bobcats, winning Rookie of the Year, and was inducted to the Brandon Bobcat Wall of Fame as part of the 1979-80 team and as a community leader. He's officiated numerous provincial championships, as well as many USPORTS championships. He's an experienced FIBA official, having served for over 10 years in some of the biggest basketball events in the world. To name a few, Nike's Hoop Summit, Jones Cup, Olympic Qualifying Tournament, 2 Pan American Games, FISU Games, and the 2000 Olympic Games in Sydney, Australia. In addition, he's officiated professionally for over 8 years in leagues in North America. He served as a local provincial and national clinician evaluator, and is the winner of the John A. Wink Willox Award. Rick, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Darcy.
So offline, you asked me, you said, what's the first question going to be? And I said, I'm not going to tell you because I wanted this to be just something that comes about. So it's interesting because you've officiated me before when I used to play a long time ago. And for you, it's probably not a long time ago. When you say you've coached and officiated for over 40 years, and I'm saying a long time ago, it doesn't really stack up. But in my world, it was a long time ago. Now, it's interesting because when you're a player, and then even as a coach, and you're a young coach, and you're a college player, you don't really know anything. You don't know people's pasts. And I remember, treating officials like, who are these guys? They're just officials. They don't know anything. What do they know, right? And that's kind of the mentality of a lot of young kids and young coaches. I remember having that mentality, and it was only much later that I found out, I'm like, wow, some of these people who are that are coaching, whether it be high school basketball or officiating, are absolute legends. Like they've done stuff, that I can only dream of, and they've been places I can only dream of. And it's very interesting how it takes a while for people to figure those things out. And that's why this podcast is super interesting, because the point of the podcast is to hear the stories. So when someone has you as an official, they're like, oh, wow, I think that's Rick DeGagne. He coached at the Olympic Games, or he officiated at the Olympic Games. You know that? And so it was weird. And just kind of just in retrospect, when you were officiating me, like you had already done like the Olympic Games. And meanwhile, I'm sitting here being a critical, like, what do I know? And I'm being so critical. So anyways, I kind of wanted to bring that up because those are kind of my memories of you. I remember you very clearly as an official. I remember, going to Brandon, whether it be as a coach or play, whatever. You'd be doing other games in Manitoba, all over Manitoba and in Canada as well. But typically we start this podcast at the beginning. Now I brought that up, but you asked me about the first question. And the first question I kind of have for you is about the Olympic Games.
Wow.
Yeah, I wanted to start there just because it's such a rare thing to have participated in. Mm-hmm. And so I just wanted to start there. And when I bring that up, those 2000 games in Sydney, Australia, I just kind of wanted to know, what were some of the first memories that come to mind when people bring that up?
Well, there you go. First question. Where to begin on that one? I guess you begin at the beginning. It's to be put into the pool of officials who would be at least considered for that kind of assignment. The process is quite different now than what it was back in the late 90s, which is when I had my certification process. So it was a lengthy process. It included physical tests. In Toronto, actually, it was a pre-Olympic tournament in 96 for the Atlanta Olympics. So women's national teams were played in this tournament, and it was also used as an opportunity for FIBA to identify Canadian officials and American officials. There were some NBA referees there as well. Mm-hmm. And I think out of 15 contestants, there were only 2 Canadians that received their license, and I was fortunate to be one of them. As I mentioned, it was the beep test was part of it, because they want you to run like a deer. You got to be in pretty good shape. Back in those days, I guess I hit the standard. There's a written test, and then you do have to do a floor evaluation as well. So And it's funny the way they operate. They don't have to, when they say thumbs up, they don't say why, what you did well. If they say thumbs down, again, they don't need to justify any of their decisions. So I was very lucky to get the thumbs up. And then from there, it was the other assignments that preceded Sydney. But with that particular assignment, it was basically a phone call from another well-known personality in the officiating community, Dave Morphy.
Mm-hmm.
So Dave Morphy was I believe at the time, the vice president of our national officiating organization. And part of his portfolio was to let officials know when they were going to be heading on a trip, representing the country. Mm-hmm. So he phoned me up actually it was on my wife's birthday, and got the good news. And then it was, okay, how do I get time off work, right? So, I mean, it's the Olympics, and some sports they last the first half week-ish, and some sports are the second week. But with basketball, it's a huge spectator sport. It runs through the entire game. So I was gone for, 3 weeks. So I needed to get off my teaching job in order to do that. So great support. My principal at the time was Rob Bend, went at U of W Collegiate, I believe. Last I heard of Rob. Then it was okay. He was a big support, and I needed support from the school board and my superintendent in Brandon, and I was lucky to get it. So,
So I mean, obviously that phone call was a big moment in your career as an official. Now you're at the Olympics. Are there any standout moments or stories that you just like to share?
Sure. There's 32 referees from around the world, and I'm not sure if I should tell that one.
Even, I don't know, maybe interactions with players, crazy stuff that happened,
okay,
things
so
that blew your mind.
I did a quarterfinal on the men's side. It was Russia versus the U.S. And some of the U.S. players were Gary Payton, Alonzo Mourning, Jason Kidd, Vince Carter. Who am I missing? Oh, Ray Allen. He could shoot the ball almost as well as you, Darcy. Ray Allen, he could pop it, right? So we had an incident late in the first half where Vince Carter was high flying up to the hoop, and I'm the lead official and trying to catch all of these bodies, see who's legal and who's not. And I think a Russian player, just tried to protect himself and sort of turned and put his forearm up, and it caught Vince Carter in a vulnerable spot while he was airborne. So, we finished the half about a minute and a half later, and my partner and I, he was from Slovenia, so we went to the scores table, and our backs were to the players, and they have specific directions. One team is supposed to exit to the right, and one is supposed to exit to the left. Well, Gary Payton and Vince Carter thought they would go over and have a few words with the Russian player that was involved in that contact play, right? So we heard the skirmish. We turned around. It's like, oh my gosh, what's going on here? It's got the referee's worst nightmare, a high-profile event, and we're going to have punches thrown. I said, no, this can't happen. Anyway, we zipped across the floor very quickly and got in the way of these players. And fortunately, that we had no issues in the second half. But for a moment there, my heart just dropped right down to the floor. But that's one particular story with a pretty well-known guy.
Yeah, no kidding. No, I can imagine. I remember that. I remember that year. I obviously watched very closely. Now, is that the highest level with regards to intensity and chips on the line that you've officiated in?
Yeah, well, that's the Olympics were, like most of the games, were pretty straightforward. I had the one play there, and then actually the U.S. that was the closest game that they had ever had at international competition using the NBA players. Mm-hmm. So they won by only 15 points. In the women's game the next night, I had a women's semifinal. It was US versus Korea. And that was a close game. I'm thinking 10 or 12 points. So they were competitive games. But as far as intensity, nothing could top the next year. In 2001, Darcy, you mentioned FISU games, World University Games, right? I was in Beijing for those games, and the talk of the tournament was the U.S. team, which was true university players, so no NBA players.
Okay.
But the Chinese team was basically the Olympic team from the year before. So they had 3 NBA guys on there. Batir was one, 7-footer. Then Wang Zizi, the lefty shooter, big guy, 6'11", and of course Yao Ming, who's 7'6", 5, whatever it is. They called them the Great Wall of China for a reason, right?
Yeah.
So everybody was looking forward to that matchup, and it basically came down to a semifinal matchup with those two. And I tell referees, getting the gold medal game and the final game isn't in a tournament, isn't the be all end all. I said a lot of times as a coach, my coaching experience, you got to get to that final game first. So before you can have a chance at winning the gold. So semifinal games are critical. And you have to have good referees on those particular games. So I've always would take pride in being assigned to semis. And but this game everyone was looking forward to it, and just a packed house, fairly small facility, and it's close. I mean, the heat from the lights, it just popped up, popped the temperature a few degrees, and we were high tempo up and down the floor. And in the last 10 seconds, the U.S. is, down by 1, and Yao Ming, he makes 2 big blocks to finish the game. And the second one, I'm the lead official in both plays, so he's in my primary. I got to watch him. But the second one is just this huge body going out to the free throw line, close to it, to swat this shot. And there was a little bit of hang time. Okay. So, for the big basketball fans, that little hang time when the ball is still on its upward flight, at what point starting to come down. And of course he swatted it, and my partner was the trail official. It's going to be his call. He's from Japan, can't speak a 1 word of English. And ball gets swatted to midcourt, player zips out there to get it, horn goes to finish the game. And of course the U.S. coach, he wants a goaltend on the play, and I grabbed him and we got to get out of here. So we just bolted to the place went bonkers, just bonkers. And we spoke to the referees who were there later, and 50% said, it was a good block, and 50% thought, no, it's a goaltend. I'm thinking if it's 50-50, that's not good enough to make the call, right? So I think my partner made the right call. So.
Wow. Yeah. I'm sure you have so many stories like that. So, I kind of wanted to start there just because it's the Olympic Games, and now you told this FISU story. You're name dropping Yao Ming and Gary Payne and Vince Carter. So I knew you had some stories there. But I wanted to get back to you. Focus back, kind of telling your story a little bit. I mean, that's part of your story. Obviously, we're there. You were the one officiating the game. But let's go back to the beginning. You're from Ontario. So the question is, and you played at Brandon. How did you end up at Brandon?
Yes, well, it's definitely a Brandon connection that got me to Brandon, in the sense of, the two high schools there, Crocus Plains and Vincent Massey. Of course, there is Neyland as well. There's 3 high schools. But Crocus and Massey came to my high school in the fall of 76. I get my last year of high school, grade 13, actually. And we played Crocus and Massey, and they played the other high school in Kenora at the time. And both coaches went. Aubrey Ferris was one coach at Massey, and Jimmy Mackey at Crocus Plains. And they both went back to Coach Hemmings and gave a positive report, I guess. I scored a few points, could knock down a jumper, not quite as good as you, but I use the glass all the time, Darcy. When in those days I learned how to use the glass. Yeah. So, so one day I'm sitting in math class, and in early May, I think, and Jerry got me out of class, and we had a chat. I went to a spring camp. I made the decision, there are other places I could go for my education and to become a teacher, and maybe make the basketball team, maybe not, maybe make it and not play. They were in the rebuilding phase at Brandon University. And I thought, you know what, I'm going to like the smaller school, the close environment, and get a chance to play right away. So that was my decision. So.
I guess it's not too far from home as well at the time.
Right.
It's far enough, but not too far.
You're right. Yeah, 5-hour drive at the time. Yeah. You know, my Chevy Vega, 6 hours. So, yeah.
And so you pretty much haven't left since. You went there and you've been there.
Yeah, you're right. I spent 2 years. My first 2 years of my teaching career were in Boissevain. Okay. And I started the basketball program there because for the boys, they had one prior, but they had been without one for about 4 or 5 years. So that was part of the deal. If we hire you, Rick, you gotta start up the boys basketball program again. I said, sure. So spent 2 years there, and then the rest of my teaching career in Brandon, 33 years. So.
Nice. Well, you know, it's interesting, Rick. So I've interviewed tons of people. Like I had Jerry on the podcast, Don Thompson. So we had few Brandon people already, considering I think we've only done like 15 episodes. So you're 2 people for already in that situation is a lot. But it's interesting because you're the first official that, I mean, I know some, maybe, I don't know. I think Don's probably officiated a game or something. I'm not quite sure what his background is, but people don't know him as an official, right? And you've coached a whole bunch. But I would say outside of Brandon, people know you as an official, right? Right. They're not like, oh, Rick DeGagne, the coach, right? So you're the first official that I've spoken to on the podcast. I'm honored. Speaking with the enemy in a sense. But of course, I'm joking. But it's interesting. I said before, many players and coaches, when they step onto the court, sometimes they think of you as the enemy, like they're competing against the other team and the officials. And I've heard coaches tell me that. And so, and again, it's not a good mentality. And I think that's something that I don't think that's the norm, but I definitely think that there's people that go into games, players specifically, with that mindset. So I say all that, just to say you're a former player, you started coaching. So why did you get into officiating?
Oh, wow. Well, as you mentioned, Darcy, I played for 3 years, and I got bad knees, right? So I really wasn't going to play that 4th year. So I stepped away from the game as a player. But our local association was short officials. Okay. And I started reffing. My first game, I was still a student at the university. It's something you don't see anymore.
What level was that? What level were you officiating?
Oh, university.
No way.
Oh, yeah, for sure. My first university game was, of course, back then it was all 2-person officiating. Oh, by the way, all of my experience is in my FIBA games, my international assignments. That was all 2-person officiating as well.
Really?
Oh, yeah. FIBA
that's new, the 3-person in FIBA.
Fairly new, like about 2004-ish were the Olympics in Athens. And I think that was the first major competition where they had 3-person officiating. Right. So, yeah, there's a lot of stuff going on there for only 2 people, right? But you said, so you asked, my first game, and it was with my Brandon University. That's my former team, right? My teammates were on the team.
Come on.
Lou Worrell. Do you know Lou?
I don't.
Oh, okay. Lou Worrell was a teammate, and Jude Kelly and Jerry Abernathy. These are all Canadians, right? Mm-hmm. And of course, Coach Hemmings. And who do they play in that first game was Nicollet Inn.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. So these are all, your alumni, Manitoba, right? Yep. So all of these, Martin Riley and the Rumseys and Watts and Daniels, and these guys are stud players back in the day, and they just carried their momentum from their university days to the senior team, the Nicollet Inn. And that was the first game that I was thrown into. And I tell you, I wasn't very good. So it was just, I was raw, and I was willing, if it didn't look right, and I wasn't sure why it didn't look right, I just blew the whistle and hoped I got a few of them right. And I know it from the perspective of the Nicollet Inn players, they probably thought that we were really putting the screws to them. And to be honest, we just weren't that good. And
Of course.
anyway, I ended up giving out my first technical foul in that game.
Wow.
Yeah.
First game, first tech. Do you remember
Yeah.
who it
Well,
was too?
yeah. I guess the players were frustrated, and I won't say the name of the player, but
I mean, come on. We're
oh,
talking
no,
over
no,
what?
no.
We're 50 years ago. You can't say who you gave a tech to?
Oh, you want to know?
Of course.
Okay, so Rick Watts, I called a foul on him. I got a rubber arm. It's easy to get the truth out of me, okay? So Rick Watts, I called a foul, and he, says to me, he says, he dropped the F-bomb, right? He says, you're freaking blind,
Yeah.
right? And I fumbled for my whistle, and I'm green. I'm so green. I put my whistle in my mouth. I technical foul, and he was walking up the floor right beside Greg Daniels, and he gives Greg Daniels an elbow. He says to Greg, he says, "At least we know he's not freaking deaf." And he used the F-bomb again. So I thought
man.
I better not tease him on the second one. So I actually started learning something right then and there about applying the rule, but you got to be careful. So
Yeah. Wow. And
First
so
game.
do you remember who like said, hey, like Rick, we need you to ref? Like who was it? Do you remember that actually pulled you in?
Yeah, I had been doing some high school games in Brandon and started out with senior men's, which is you start at the hardest level, right? Those guys don't ever foul. You play senior men's, Darcy.
Oh yeah, it's
guys never
worst.
foul, and every time they
Anything.
miss a shot, hey, somebody got me. And
Oh yeah.
so I've been doing some high school and senior men's before, but the guy in charge at the time was Russ Roney.
Okay.
So Russ was our local leader, our assigner, and a couple other guys like Bob Neville. We lost Bob a couple of years ago, Russ a few years before that. These were the gentlemen who were running our organization, and they saw some potential, I guess, and they're the ones that approached me, and we're going to throw you into the fire, Rick, so let's go.
Who were some of your early mentors when it came to officiating? I'm sure they were, but then when you started to develop and I know with officiating, like we had mentioned in the bio, there is actually at least recently there's programs in place to offer mentorship and evaluation, stuff like that. But back when you were first getting into it, did that exist? And if so, who were some of your mentors that kind of guided you through those early years?
The term mentor or being mentored was not a big thing back in the day. It was just a lot of informal conversation and feeding off each other and, getting things off TV. And then, and somebody gets a trip into Winnipeg, you work with somebody different and you learn something, you bring it back. So my very good friend, Dave Bauman, and I did a lot of traveling together. We'd come in, and work games and we'd watch other referees. And so we fed off each other a fair bit. The two gentlemen I mentioned, but I would be remiss if I didn't mention Rod Pepler, who, again, another, just a real promoter of officials. And he had his strange, peculiar ways about getting information across to officials. But whenever he evaluated me or saw me, there was always information that I knew I could use and I would incorporate. So I owe a lot to Rod Pepler. And guys like Morphy and Wes Krimble, in terms of giving feedback, yes, for sure, but also giving opportunity in terms of assignments to national assignments. Wes Krimble did that for a lot of years. So I've been assigned to, I think, 17 national tournaments as an official. Went to most of them, 15, I think, but Wes was a big part of that. So
yeah, absolutely. So I mean, you had mentioned you're still playing, you started coaching, and then you started officiating. So at some point, either you were doing all three at the same time, or they just missed each other. You're very, very close, but you have a very different perspective because not a lot of people can say that they've done all of those at the same time or very close together. Most people, like, I coach, I played, and then I go into coaching, right? And then they play senior men's or whatever. And then you see some people who play and they officiate, but they're not necessarily coaching. And so, I mean, what I guess I'm trying to say is it's offered you maybe a different perspective that I don't think many have. So I'm going to kind of switch it now and ask you a question about coaching. How do you think that your perspective in officiating affected your ability to coach games? And maybe speak a little bit of how you understood things differently than some of your coaching peers who are probably quick to, judge officials and say, oh, they should be doing this, they should be doing that. I don't know, just generally commenting on that dynamic, because I know your mindset's going to be vastly different than like someone who's just coached for 20 years.
I think that first of all, as a player, you really bring, I think, a real basic understanding to the game as an official. And I actually gave this information this last weekend at the USPORTS Women's Championships in Kingston. I was there as a referee coach. So we don't call them evaluator or signers anymore.
Coaches.
We call them we are coaches, exactly.
Yeah.
We are referee coaches. So there were 3 referee coaches and 12 officials for the tournament. And I remember speaking to a player or to one of our refs, like as a former player, you understand certain things, especially the emotion that goes on in a game, right? I mean, as a player, I remember you just go, and you're a pretty emotional guy, so you know what I'm talking about. You brought a lot of fire and energy to the floor. But when you get bumped and you think you were wrong, then the whistle doesn't go. It's just it's not good. It's not a good feeling, right?
Yeah,
so,
yep.
But I mean, and players are going to react in certain ways. Maybe they get frustrated with what's going on the floor. Sometimes at us and sometimes not at us. But as a former player, I know that maybe a really good example of somebody who has a great feel for that is Earl Roberts. Earl's a very good friend of mine, yep. And I refereed Earl when he played for the Bobcats, and now he's an outstanding official. He's been doing at the high level, the university stuff for a long, long time. He brings just a great composure and a great insight. Doesn't get too high. Understands how players are going to react. He understands the emotion involved in the game and coaches. So he's really fun to watch.
No, absolutely.
To your point about doing all 3 at the same time. Yes, I did. And then I'm not sure if it was fortunately or unfortunately, but in a game I tore my ACL. So there goes my playing career came to a sudden halt. And when I recovered, I had more time to take up officiating on a more serious basis.
So I have to ask this question. So
Sure.
This just came to mind. You're now in Brandon. I know, there's obviously only so many officials, and there's only so many officials at a certain level. And you're coaching. Have you ever had to? I'm sure the answer is yes, but maybe have there been any situations that have been potentially a little bit awkward where you are now officiating a coach or in the league that you're actually coaching in?
Yeah, I think I understand your question, but
yeah.
let me frame it like this: as an official who's done a lot of high level stuff, and I'm sitting on the bench as an assistant coach, and the officials out on the floor are people who are, they're my officiating colleagues and friends, right? And my number one concern was always not to upstage anybody when a mistake is made, because I mean we all make mistakes, gosh, or try to, heaven forbid, intimidate anybody. Like, I mean, that's not my style. I try to be quiet. I let the head coach, Dave Malowski, I spent a couple of years coaching with Dave Malowski, who is just an outstanding coach. And I let him do the X's and O's, and I'll help out with the substitutions and catch the shot clock if it doesn't get reset properly. I think that's one of the things that I can bring, right? As a referee, I'm always watching the shot clock or the game clock. Oh, it ran for an extra 2 or 3 seconds. So I'll catch that. But the point, I prefer not to interact with the officials. And we preach to the officials, you deal with the head coach. You don't deal with the assistant coach, right? Even if he is your supervisor kind of thing, you just, Rick over there, just ignore me, right? That's what the officials should do. And that's what they did, which is good on them.
And then what about situations where you're on the other side? So you're now officiating,
right,
a game, and it's obviously not your 2 teams, but it's 2 other teams or a team in your league. Is that ever awkward? I mean, I think people in Brandon understand like there's that dynamic of a small town. I don't think that maybe is an issue, but I'm just thinking, I'm in Winnipeg or something, and one of the coaches on another team is now an official, and he's reffing me in the same league. That must have happened all the time in Brandon.
Oh gosh, yeah. We had at one point, we had like 6 or 7 university referees, and they all played for Jerry. It's like, I know the Winnipeg coaches and the Manitoba coach, they come in, and it's like,
yeah,
obviously right away there's this negative perception, but the reality is you've got people who understand the game. They're going to go out there and give the game their best effort, and they're going to try to view the game in a neutral capacity, right? Yep. Like we're supposed to do. And people's perceptions are hard to change though, but
they are. They really, really are. If you think that that's happening, it won't even matter what happens. You're going to find like the one instance that shows any evidence. And look, I knew it. The other team stepped out and they didn't call it. Brandon stepped on the line. They didn't call it. I knew the fix was in. It's like one call.
You can't win. Yeah. So it reminds me of a story. You said I can go ahead and tell stories.
Oh, love it.
Is that still open? Okay,
absolutely.
So, Coach Suffield? Of
course.
Yeah, so he brought his Manitoba team. They had a really good team. Isaac Ansa was on the team. He's an outstanding player, right? So as a playoff team.
Just so you know, if Isaac was on the team, then that's my team. So I don't know if
Oh, awesome.
Yeah, because we played the 2 years together. But anyways, continue.
Oh, okay, awesome. Sorry.
I want to know.
Sorry, partner. I remember reffing you. Like you remember me, but I do remember you. Just all the years they blend into each other.
No. I'm thinking like, where's this story gonna go?
But it's okay. So it's playoff game.
Okay.
All right. So a lot of fans coming out, so they have to open. I guess earlier in the day in their shoot around, the stage doors were closed. Mm-hmm. Okay. So when game time, stage doors open, and then they put bleachers up there, and of course, free throws, you're looking right at, into the backdrop and all these fans. And Coach Suffield said to Bill Moody, one of our referees, who has always got a good one-liner. Mm-hmm. Coach Suffield says, well, what are we going to do with all those fans, making all the noise and waving, when we're shooting free throws? And Bill Moody said, well, that's not going to be a problem. You're not going to get any. And Coach Suffield got a pretty good laugh out of that as well.
Oh, so that's a good one. I love that. That's a nice one. Too good. So I want to kind of go back to the FIBA
sure.
thing. So you had mentioned it's changed a lot, obviously, since the pathway has changed. So I mean, the first question I have is, you had talked about how you got the Olympic offer, but at that point you were already a FIBA official, correct?
Correct.
So how did you become? I don't know if was it carded? Is that how you?
Yes.
Yeah. So how did you become carded? And I guess what was the process then? How were you brought along? What was the pathway?
Well, to
just being a carded. Because to be eligible for all those events we listed, you have to be a FIBA official, right? So is there like a test? Like obviously you have to be nominated, I'm sure, at some point. But what is it? What did it look like for you specifically?
Okay, so you're right. There was a nomination process, and way less formal than what it is now. I did a tournament, the CCAA men's tournament, outstanding tournament. Oh, the level of basketball at that tournament is it's wicked good. And it really high-paced games they play. But I did the gold medal game there. It was 1993 in Regina. So from that particular assignment, I was nominated. And the way it worked back then, Darcy, you needed to be nominated by the age of 35. And I just got under the wire by a couple of years. And then you needed to go to a clinic and certify before the age of 40. And once again, I was just under the limit there a little bit. What happens is in North America, we don't get these opportunities, and And we weren't playing pure FIBA rules. We had the women's university, they played FIBA with one or two modifications thrown in there, but even when you played, it was NCAA rules, correct?
Yep, yep.
Yeah. But what's happened is there are 205 countries around the world that have basketball federations, and they all play full-time FIBA, except Canada at the time was part-time. And of course, the United States, no FIBA whatsoever. So we just don't have the same game experience as referees from around the world. So therefore they extend it for us, and they put limits on the whole age thing, the whole age criteria.
Got it.
And speaking of the age, but when you turn 50, they automatically, you're done. So it's
Wow.
yes, it's discriminatory, but
Wow.
again, they don't have to give, this is our rule, take it or leave it, and you're done. So
Interesting.
yeah.
So then after the CCA thing, like you were essentially nominated from there. Someone said, "Hey, we love what you're doing," or you met somebody. What was that?
Yes.
Like?
Yes. And that's when I went to Toronto for that 1996, the Atlanta games pre-tournament down in Toronto.
Got it. So it happened fairly quickly.
Oh, it does. It's amazing how quickly it goes like this. And then after the Olympics, I sort of like this. It's just, who's the next flavor? Who's the next person coming along? And it's a very dynamic process. And it's hard to stay in tune with what's happening, but
for sure.
Yeah.
So now the pathway, like you had mentioned before, was much different. Can you kind of talk about the current pathway, maybe for some people that are aspiring officials, young officials?
You know what? Awesome question. I think first of all, officials need to be to get out of their province. They have to go to national tournaments, right, and be recognized by the higher level administration of our national body organization. So, and from there, if again age is a bit of a factor, and when I had my card, Darcy, it was just the one card, one type of card. Right now they have 3 different types.
Oh, okay.
And I'm going to make a mistake on this, but they're given colors. So there's a green, there's a green one, there's a black one and a white one, but they're kind of specific. So one is for female only. One is for, I think it's age 30 and under, and one is kind of an open. So Canada right now, I believe we have in the 12 to 14 range. So there's a limit as well as to how many cards, FIBA carded officials a country can have, and ours is, I think it's 14.
Got it.
So the decision makers need to look at, if you have, let's just say, a really good 29-year-old female official, well, you can put her in this card here, or you could put this official into this category here. And you put them here because, you've got another person under 30. So they can really strategize who they want to receive which kind of card.
Okay, yeah. So it seems like they've like, it is a little more complicated.
Yes.
More complex, I should say.
I'm not sure if I did a good job of explaining that or not, but.
Well, no, I think that makes sense. And then so like if somebody does want to hey, like their goal is they are very serious about officiating. Obviously at the local level, they've been identified. They've gone on to officiate at the like the national tournament, or like say the Canada Games or something like that.
Sure. Yeah.
At that point, it is more so up to the evaluators, correct? Like you've made it to that point, but now it's like, okay, you're being evaluated, and from that pool, based off of course these metrics that are officiating metrics. Again, I have no idea what they are. We don't have to get into them, but then the people are hey, they're rated. I guess there's probably a rating system, and then people get nominated based off of need, right? Because you can only have so many. Is that kind of how it works?
Yeah, sure. So they'll develop a prospects list. Okay. And with the idea of targeting, X number of officials for this particular category of card. So the 14 that we have now, and they need to recertify every 2 years.
Okay.
Back when I had my card, it was every 4 years. So it's an ongoing process, and you really, if you're a FIBA referee now, FIBA carded official, you really need to bring your good stuff all the time, and you are getting reevaluated every 2 years. And unfortunately, there's not a lot of trips, like opportunities outside of the country for some of our referees. We could always use more opportunity for them.
Absolutely, yeah. Okay, well, kind of want to shift gears a little bit.
Sure.
We talked about stories. You opened up the podcast with 2 awesome stories. So I mean, these ones here, they're not quick hitters, but they're just straightforward questions. So what's your most memorable basketball moment? Now, this could be as a player, as a coach, as an official.
Oh, wow.
Whatever. I mean, you've like I said, you've done all of them. So what comes to mind? And you can tell more than one story if you'd like.
My last year we played at Lakehead University, and we played in a 5 overtime game. Yeah, it was it's
Is that has to be up there for as far as USPORT or CIS, like one of the longest games? No?
I think it's
5
still a
overtimes?
USPORT. It's still a USPORT record, I believe. Back in those days, it was called CIAU, right?
Yeah, CIAU. Then it turned to CIS, and now it's
Yeah.
USPORT, yeah.
So let's hold on to USPORT. There's right there,
Yeah.
USPORT for a while, but
Yeah.
at the time it was, I think, even a North American record, and it was broken the next year, I think, down in the States. But
Okay.
yeah, no, it was. I think I got 2 minutes. I wasn't a starter my second and third year. I started my first, but so I got a couple minutes in the first half, and then we go to halftime, and you touch the basketball a little bit, and you go sit down for the second half. I sat through the second half, the first overtime, the second overtime, the third, and pretty much all of the fourth. So in real time,
Wow.
I mean, rigor mortis was setting in.
I was gonna say,
stiff as all get out,
Yeah.
Had the red dots on my knees where my elbows were putting pressure on my knees, sitting on the bench. And I got a chance late in the fourth, and we pushed it to another overtime, and then had a knocked down a bunch of shots in the fifth overtime, and we outscored them 25-11 or something in the last quarter. So we really blew it open, and I had 7 points, I think, in the last quarter or last 5-minute frame.
Wow. So
yeah, I was pretty. Actually played some defense too, which was kind of nice. So
yeah. So was that just a regular season game, playoff game, or?
It was a regular season game. Lakehead had a very good team. Dave and John Zanetta, Richie Silvera. They had some outstanding players, and I had matched up against John Zanetta in the past, but I got him when he was tired.
Yeah, no kidding. Hey, you've been resting over there. That's crazy. A 5 overtime game. Wow. Okay, so most memorable basketball moment. You picked the one as a player. This one's going to be a specific to an official, and I'm using the word crazy. Now I'll let you decide how you want to define that. But your craziest basketball moment as an official.
Craziest basketball moment. Well, okay, so we had. I ref the national final, men's final in Halifax in 1999. And it was the first time the final ever went into overtime. And we had a play late in regulation that was really goofy. A player, I was a center official in front of the University of Alberta bench, and the play was on the baseline on the other side of the basket, and a player for U of A was falling out of bounds and trying to save the ball, and he threw it behind the backboard. But the backboard has the 3 supports, like so, and the ball passed through behind the board, and it passed through, and I don't see it touch it. It may have, but the one official blew the whistle. My partner said it touched, and then of course he got together with the partner on that side, and they concurred that yes, there was contact there, and the ball went to to St. FX, but
Mm-hmm.
Coach Don Horwood was right behind me and he was going ballistic that
Yep.
it hadn't touched. And it was like, it's our ball. And it's like, I can't help you. My partners have already made a decision here. I don't have clear information on this. Go to the monitor, well, those days, the monitor was there, but you didn't use it. So it wasn't permitted. So it was pretty crazy. Then we went into overtime and St. FX won the game in overtime, but it was pretty dicey for a while there.
Interesting. Okay.
Interesting, but not crazy, Darcy.
Well, no, it's crazy because I'm no Coach Horwood, and they're in the like I would imagine he's going nuts. Now, funniest basketball moment, again, officiating, coaching, it doesn't matter. Just in basketball, and in whatever comes to mind.
Oh, now you're really funny. Maybe it's because
like maybe I mean, you kind of told one already, the Suffield one, that was pretty good. But maybe a coach comes out and he's yelling, he trips on the floor, or I don't know, like something silly with a player, something in the fans. Was there any moments where you had to remove a fan for doing something crazy, or I don't know?
Oh gosh,
anything like that?
Yeah, I mean, when you tell a guy not to blow the trumpet in your ear,
yeah,
I'll tell him once, and the second time it was like, he had to leave the gym.
You gotta go.
Yeah, funny. Oh my goodness, I don't know if I have one.
Okay, well, I mean, you technically already told it because the Suffield one was pretty good. That was
that was pretty good. Thanks. Yeah,
that was damn good. That was pretty good. Okay, well, we're kind of coming to the end here. I always ask a question at the end for advice, essentially. I mean, you've obviously, we talked a little bit about officiating and things like that, but this is specific advice. And the advice is to young basketball players or young officials, right? So a lot of times, as your story and many people's stories, a lot of the people you pull from are former high school players, or they're people who have played the game at some level. Sometimes it's college and they started in high school, but former players or young officials that want to. So it's a two-part question, because the first part is I'm a player and I'm thinking about officiating. So advice to them. And then the second part of the question is advice to people who are already officiating, young officials. And just something, if you had a room of them in front of you, some solid advice that you would give them just to kind of make sure they're on the straight path.
Well, the first part, not everybody wants to try officiating, right? So, but, and I understand it's just not in their DNA. I have 4 kids. They've all refereed. And my youngest daughter, she said, Dad, I would get sick to the stomach every time I refereed. And she would only referee with me. So I didn't realize how bad it was. So she got really nervous and didn't like it, right? Yeah. Whereas my other kids, they enjoyed it. And yeah, but I think give it a try, right? So if you have a university level or high school player, and it doesn't even have to be a person who's played the sport, to be honest, but even though it's helped, give it a try, and I think start small in your minor games in your junior high schools, and make sure that there's somebody around who's watching the game and not just sort of abandoning you. Here's the whistle, here's the ball. I'll come back and pick you up in an hour and a half. You want somebody to be there to watch and to be that support. Okay. I find that we lose officials because they're not supported properly. Okay. We don't support them through education properly. I mean, we try, but I think I know it can be better. In our association in Brandon, we can do a better job. But we support them through resources that are online now that are more plentiful. We support them by being physically in the gymnasium. We support them by giving them some quality feedback. When you're new and starting out, it's got to be just the basic stuff, like the fundamentals. Where do you stand? Where do you move to? Where are you watching? What is your coverage? And then from there you build on signals and so on. But eventually the goal is for us to make the correct call. So call quality is pretty important stuff eventually down the road. So the feedback has to be supportive with fundamentals, but then again, later on, being truthful too. Like if you're an up and comer, if you've been reffing now, the second part of the question, right? If you've been reffing high school basketball for multiple years, and you have aspirations to become a university level official, well, there's going to be a lot of honest discussion, right, about what you're doing well and what you absolutely need to change. And I'm not going to tell an official that was a correct call when it wasn't a correct call, right? So we look at, if it's not a correct call, what is it that you didn't do right? What was missing? Was it the positioning? Were you too close to the play? Were you too far from the play? Were you moving? Were you what exactly were you what were you looking at? Did you see the entire play from the beginning, then you watch it develop, and then did you watch it finish? Or did you just get halfway through and then you took your eyes off the play and you missed something? So for those officials who have been around for a few years, then that's the kind of feedback that they need to get from their mentors here in the city and in the province.
I like that. I mean, like you said, the thing that stood out in all those things was that mentorship is really important. And then the people, regardless at the level they're at, they have to be open and almost seek it out. Like if you want to be really successful, you need to almost seek out the mentorship, because it's going to be there in some level. But if you're one of those keen people that's asking questions and can take constructive criticism and is actually desiring that, like, hey, tell me this, tell me that, you're probably going to have more success and you'll actually get more mentorship because you're actually seeking it out. And it sounds like that's a super big, important piece of.
It really is. It's 100%, Darcy. And in this day and age with the technology as well, right? Like we can give you feedback. We don't just talk about plays. We can give you the clips, and we can show you physically where you were standing, look at, and really break down the clip. And it's an enormous learning tool.
For sure.
But
it's almost like you guys are like players, coaches break down film. Officials also break down film.
Oh, absolutely. We watched on this last weekend here down in Kingston. I probably watched each, there are 11 basketball games. I saw every minute of every game, and each game probably had 30 or 40 clips, and we probably looked at 20, 25 in most of those games. That's a lot of feedback for our officials. For sure. And when you talk about mentoring as well, like I think that it's important that if there's more than one person that a young official can go and get and be mentored or have as a mentor, get 2 or 3 or 4 people. I think the more perspectives you have, the better. Because we all have those different experiences, and certain things are more important. And I just think that that's going to be very, beneficial for that young official.
Absolutely. Now, pretty much all done. This question at the beginning. You said that you're still officiating. Are you still on the court officiating? You're still running up and down?
Yeah, except the last game of the regular season, Manitoba at Brandon, I pulled a hamstring just before the halftime. So I'm on the shelf, but it was I missed the playoffs, which was a bad thing. I was going to go to Lethbridge and Calgary and work some men's playoff games, but didn't happen. So I'm in recovery mode.
Soon or what? Are you going to hang it up soon? When are you going to hang it up?
You know what? I got to listen to my body. So.
Are you going to do the same thing you did when you were a basketball player that every basketball player does? You're going to wait till your body breaks down and says you just can't do it anymore. Are you going to do that for refereeing?
I am that stubborn that I probably will. My daughter says to me, she's an occupational therapist, Danielle, and she says, "Dad, you got to look after yourself. You want to have some quality of life when you're in your golden years." So she knows what she's talking about.
Yeah, she's not wrong, but you're saying, well, I like what I'm doing right now. So what do you want me to do about it? Right. It's like you do something for so long and you love it, and it becomes it's not entirely who you are, but it is a big part of who you are. You have your family, you have friends, but then it's like, well, a lot of the joy and the purpose in your life comes from something. And if you don't have to give it up, why would you give it up? I mean, I get it.
Exactly.
I
Yeah.
totally get
I
it.
mean, there is always the chance to mentor after and to
Of
to
course.
continue to be a referee, coach, and evaluate and that sort of thing. But I figure if I can still get up and down the floor, the players are getting faster. I'm not getting older and slower, Darcy.
Yeah.
They're just,
I was just gonna say,
oh
because
my
early
gosh.
you mentioned when we were talking about the City Olympics and like try and like you were saying, you have to do beep tests and you're like you have to be in pretty good shape and running and stuff like that. And I said, you know what, like I mean, now that was a long time ago, and you're still running up and down. I guess that's why you tore, you tore the hamstring, but the game, and again, this is kind of an aside, but I'm curious what your thoughts on are. Like when I played, and then even when I coached, and even now, the game moves at a different pace now. It's not
Yeah.
like, okay, transition, right? Like a team's out and running, they're out and running, but just some of the half court sets and the pace at where like even just look at the way that the game is involved when it comes to screening, like setting screens, the pace at which that all takes place. Before, you would like guys would walk up and like set more of these slow, even something like that has changed. um you know Again, I'm just kind of like ranting about it now, but I mean, you've
No,
obviously seen these changes, right?
you're 100% right. And you've just hit the nail on the head with one of the items that was a major focus for us this past weekend in these national championships. And that was the screening, especially, with a handoff play.
Mm-hmm.
Like players go hard at a teammate,
Yep.
and then it's a little flip or a handoff play, and then all of us there are four people involved in the play. Well, any one of the four could do something illegal, right?
Mm-hmm.
Their elbow, or they're too wide down below, or they just want to blow through the edge of the screener. And these are really tough plays to officiate. And we helped our crew by breaking it down on that video. But with the rule set that we have, we've had FIBA now, I think it's 12 years.
Mm-hmm.
And what that rule set does, it just takes the strategizing of the coach out of the game. Like the in-game adjustments, it's harder to do because you have to coach these players in advance, right? You don't have the same timeouts, and you have limited timeouts. There are restrictions. But that game goes with the 8 seconds in the backcourt, like to get the ball over the midcourt line. It's faster than 10 seconds when you played, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And the shot clock isn't 30 seconds anymore, it's 24. Mm-hmm. And then a few years ago, they put in another rule where if you have the ball in your backcourt and it goes out of bounds, or if there's a foul or a violation, and now the offensive team gets new possession on a throw-in from the front court, the shot clock drops to 14 seconds.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So it's attack. It just promotes offense is what it does.
Well, even the offensive, like you had mentioned, offensive reset. So when there's an offensive rebound, it just goes to 14 now, right? Or 12? Or is it 12?
It's 14.
14. Yeah.
We don't use that rule for our high school at the high school level, mainly because of the equipment and the training that would have to take place at that level. Mm-hmm. But at the university level, it's just, you don't have much time to take it out, and then you got to go look at attacking the basket again.
Yeah.
So these are great rules that really promote an up-tempo game. I think it's more entertaining, and it's.
Yep. No, I agree 100%. It's funny when you were mentioning the screens and like the handoffs, double handoffs, they're doing all this stuff. I'm big in the FIBA 3x3 game. And, and man, if you want to talk about screen, rescreen, it's because it's only a 12-second shot clock. And because of all the space, screening and that on-ball action is like, it's just so important part of the game. And so if you watch some of the possessions in that, it's just like, it's mind-boggling. And they, when the game was developing, it's a new discipline. So the officiating is developing alongside the game, and it's all this really cool interplay where they're changing the way they officiate the game as the game is evolving. Same as 5-on-5. that's happening in this much shorter time frame, right? Because the game is so
Right.
new, and that game started off super physical, and they've now found this like sweet spot. So they've really started calling the screening very, very closely. But there was a time when I could show you a clip of that, and you would be like, "Oh my goodness, it's just moving screens everywhere, guys running in." They've kind of gotten rid of it, but it's exactly like 5-on-5, the same type of like, you know, the actions that take place. I watch games, and it's, you know, everyone has their opinion on, oh, that's a foul, this, that. Honestly, I don't even like, you look at stuff and stuff is so bang bangs. Sometimes you're like, it's a hard call. And now that's why you have to like be able to watch it on video and replay this, because in the moment you're like, I don't know what that is. I'm even watching replays sometimes. I'm like, I don't know what that is, because players are getting so good and it's happening so fast and it's happening multiple times in a single possession.
Yes.
It's chaos. But we got to wrap up. I would love to keep talking about this.
Problem.
We got to wrap up. Rick, I appreciate it. I hope that you can, you know, recover the hammy, get back on the court. You know, at some point, the hope is always, I'm kind of on your daughter's side with this. I do understand the continued, you know, that's a desire to continue to do it. But at the same time, you know, it's nice to be able to walk away feeling good about your body. So there's that balance. And I hope that's the choice that you get to make. So I appreciate you taking the time today and talking, and I wish you the best. And I hope that I get to see you, because I haven't been to a USPORTS game in a long time. So if I definitely see you at the game, I'll give you a wave and
sure. We'll get caught up again.
Absolutely.
Sure. Appreciate this. Thanks so much.
Okay. You take care.
Thanks. You as well, Darcy.
All right. Bye-bye.
Okay. Yeah. Bye now.
Thanks for listening to today's episode. Please like, subscribe, follow, and share this series, and reach out to us with your comments on the show. Thanks again for joining us.